Imagine you are 6 years old. You can already sing better than most adults. You can feel the music in your chest before you even hear it. You dance the way other kids breathe, automatically, instinctively, without thinking. Now imagine your father is watching you. Not the way most fathers watch their children. Not with pride exactly. With calculation. With a clipboard in his mind. Noting every mistake. Measuring every performance. Already deciding what comes next for you. That is the world Michael Jackson was born into. And the strangest part is, for a few years, he loved it. Gary, Indiana, 1964. This is not a place that produces legends. It is a steel town, a working town, a town where the air smells like the mill and the future looks like your father's job. Joseph Walter Jackson worked at that mill. He also had a guitar he never quite made it anywhere with. 5 sons, 1 daughter, a 2-bedroom house, and an idea. The idea was simple and ruthless in equal measure. His children were talented enough to escape Gary, and they would, one way or another. The Jackson 5 started performing seriously around 1964, when Michael was 6. Jackie was the oldest, then Tito, Jermaine, Marlon. Michael was the youngest in the lineup. He was also almost immediately the most gifted, and Joseph saw it right away. Here is where the story gets complicated. Because what happened next was not simply a father pushing his kids toward success. It was something more systematic than that, more controlled, and for Michael specifically, more consuming. Joe Jackson ran rehearsals like a foreman runs a factory floor. The boys practiced every day after school, every weekend. Holidays were not a break from rehearsals. Rehearsals were the holiday. If a note was wrong, Joe said so. If a move was sloppy, Joe said so. If Michael drifted off or lost focus, Joe said something about that too. Michael later described being hit with a belt when mistakes were made. He described being called names. He described a fear of his father that never fully went away. Not even decades later, when Michael was the most famous person alive. But here's the thing that makes this story genuinely difficult to navigate. It worked. Not just
commercially, technically, musically. The discipline that Joe Jackson enforced produced something extraordinary. By the time Michael was 8 years old, he had stage presence that professional entertainers spend careers trying to develop. He could read an audience. He could hold a note and then push it further. He could watch James Brown once on a television set and then reproduce the footwork almost exactly. The talent was real. The gift was genuine. But the conditions that sharpened it were not what most people would call a childhood. In 1969, the Jackson 5 signed with Motown. This is the moment most people know. The screaming crowds, the television appearances, the 4 consecutive #1 singles straight out of the gate. ABC, I Want You Back, The Love You Save, I'll Be There. Michael was 11 years old. Think about that for a second. He was 11 years old, performing on national television, being discussed by industry executives as though he were a product with moving parts. Motown's founder, Berry Gordy, controlled everything. Their image, their sound, their interviews, their clothing. The boys were coached on what to say to journalists. They were given a fictional backstory that softened the rough edges of Gary. They were told their father had discovered them, which was true. But the version of the story the public received was considerably warmer than the version that happened inside the house. Michael wore platform shoes on stage to appear older. He was encouraged to project confidence, charisma, a kind of effortless joy. And he could do it. The performance came easily to him. What sat underneath the performance was another matter entirely.
There is a particular kind of pressure that builds when a child becomes the commercial center of a family enterprise. Everyone's comfort starts to depend on your output, your father's ambition, your brother's futures, the record label's quarterly numbers, the tour promoter's bookings. All of it resting, quietly, on an 11-year-old's ability to deliver every single night. Michael has described not having a normal childhood in almost every interview he ever gave. He was not speaking metaphorically. He meant it literally. While children his age were in school, making friends, figuring out who they were in low-stakes environments, Michael was in recording studios, on tour buses, in green rooms. He watched other children play from the window. He said that more than once. Through a window. There was no time to be awkward and quiet and confused in the way that adolescence requires. There was only the next performance, the next record, the next city. And here was the irony that the public largely missed at the time. The songs Michael sang were about joy, about dancing, about being young and free and in love. And he sang them with total conviction, because he was a remarkable performer. But the life those songs described was not the life he was living. By his early teens, Michael was noticing things about himself that he did not know what to do with. He was developing acne, which devastated him, in a way that seems disproportionate until you remember that his face was literally his instrument. He was told, and the evidence suggests this came from his father, that he had a wide nose, that his face was not right. These comments landed in the mind of a boy who had no private space to process them. No therapist, no normal peer group, no ordinary adolescence to cushion the blow. The seeds of what would become his most public
struggles were planted here, not in fame, in the years just before fame hardened into something permanent. When the family eventually left Motown and signed with Epic Records in the mid-1970s, the dynamic shifted. Michael was older. His individual talent was becoming undeniable in ways that even the most controlling structures could not contain. He began pushing for creative control. He wanted to write. He wanted to produce. He wanted to be something more than a vehicle for other people's decisions. Off the Wall came in 1979. Thriller in 1982. By then, the story of the Jackson 5 had largely been rewritten in the public mind as an origin myth, a charming story about brothers from Indiana who made it big. The more difficult version, the version with the belt and the rehearsals and the window and the lost childhood, that version was always there. Michael returned to it again and again throughout his life, in interviews, in songs, in the choices he made as an adult that confused so many people and make considerably more sense when you understand where they came from. The question that lingers is not really about Joe Jackson, though he is easy to condemn. The question is about what we ask of children when we recognize exceptional talent in them. Every structure that surrounded Michael's childhood, his father, the label, the industry, the audiences, wanted the performance. They wanted what he could produce. Very few people in that system were primarily concerned with what it cost. Michael Jackson became the biggest solo artist in the history of recorded music. He also spent his entire adult life circling back to the childhood he did not have, trying to reconstruct it, trying to understand it, unable to fully leave it behind. Whether that is a tragedy or simply the price of something rare, that is a question nobody has cleanly answered yet. And maybe that is the point. Exceptional things often come from exceptionally damaged places. We consume the product and look away from the process. We we always have.